Episode number 32 of Making the Case. We talking about son husbands and why they so detrimental to our society. Let's get it. Hey, what up, YouTube philosophers? Hey, we back with another episode of Making the Case, episode number 32, man. Glad to have you back. As always, I'm thankful and appreciative of my subscribers and my watchers. There would be no me without you. So I appreciate you. All right. Once again, it's your boy, Dr. Jacob Isom, educator, author, speaker, entrepreneur, a little bit of everything. We want to welcome you back to Making the Case, man. For those of you that are new to the channel, Making the Case is where we take a topic or a question and we do research on it. And I say whether something is yay or nay, whether I go left or right on a topic, and I just make my case on why I think something is what it is. All right. So that's the gist of what we got going on this channel. We got two channel norms. One, we attack points and not people. And the second thing, we don't do all the cussing and derogatory stuff. We like to keep it professional. You know what I mean? All right. So as you can see, I have, my it didn't get cold, man. I don't know where you at in the world, but of course it's fall, so most places are gonna be pretty chilly at this point. Well, of course, some of us are living those warm weather. You know, I ain't jealous. So, but it's pretty chilly here where I'm at, and so I had to put on some long sleeves. So moving forward, that's probably what you're gonna see me in. Not that you care. But so let's get into my opening statement. All right. So, son husbands, I'm pretty sure that you've heard of the term before. And in this episode, what we're going to do, we're going to get a little bit more scientific, psychological when it comes to the term son husbands, right? Because there's a more scientific basis for it. But the more popular term is son husbands, right? And some people might be thinking, well, why isn't they're the opposite, right? Why they're not daughter wife, right? Well, first of all, it just don't sound right. All right. But second of all, you do not really see the dynamic when it comes to a father and his daughter, right? Because typically a father will have a woman, and even if he doesn't have a woman, he's comfortable with being single. All right. So the psychology behind a daughter, father and a daughter dynamic really doesn't lend itself to what we're going to be talking about today. So we're going to go a little deep. All right. As always, I got three pieces of evidence to make my case on why son husband is really detrimental to our culture. Not only is it detrimental, I'm sorry, that's me. I apologize. I forgot to turn my ring off. Okay. Forgive me. All right. And the reason why I say it's detrimental to society and our culture is because, like, the mere fact and the mere idea of there being a relationship damage between a son and his mother that kind of goes beyond that boundary set between a mother and a son. Of course, a mother will always be there when it comes to, support, sometimes when it comes to being sick and things of that nature. But there's almost, and it's not an Oedipus complex. I mean, I think a lot of you may be familiar with the Oedipus complex. Oedipus complex is more sexual in nature when the child, the son, really has an animosity or hate towards the father because he's jealous more of a sexual nature. But this really is not an Oedipus complex. This is more so a psychological underpinning where sons feel a gravitation towards their mother because their mother doesn't have that male figure around to protect her. So the son feel like he has to step into that role and be that protector and provider in a lot of cases, right? So that's why we call it the son husband dynamic. So in this episode, what we're going to do, we're going to break down what they define the son husband kind of ideology. We're gonna break that down, and we're gonna talk about some different factors to kind of break down what would make a mother kind of appear to be a mother and a son appear to be a son husband. Okay, so we're gonna break all that down with my 3 pieces of evidence. Once again, I got a great show for you, great info lined up for you. So without further ado, guess what we're gonna do? We're gonna get into our first piece of evidence. All right. Let's get it. All right. So for my piece of evidence number 1, why son husbands are kind of detrimental to the culture, to society, is we're gonna break down what son husbands are, right? So you already know, if you've been watching the channel, I like to define things so that we all on equal playing field, that we have the same understanding, right? So we're not operating from 2 different perspectives. Okay. So I found an article from my favorite platform, which is the Medium. They always have great content. So I usually go to them when it comes to stuff like this. When it's great topics like this, I definitely usually go to them. They're a go-to platform. But so we're going to break down what a son husband is. And then we're going to get into some other things with, the upcoming pieces of evidence. All right. But first, let's get into it. Here we go. The name of this article is Enmeshment in the Creation of Son Husbands. All right. This post is a bit of deep dive into a topic that hits close to home for many guys, myself especially, enmeshment in the son husband phenomenon. It's an often overlooked topic, but it's crucial for understanding some of the dynamics men may face in their relationship with their mothers, and how those dynamics can negatively impact their ability to formulate healthy relationships. And that is the reason why I'm saying that it's detrimental to society and culture, because even though the relationship between the mother and the son may be healthy when it comes to the mother and the son, but if that son wants to have a healthy relationship with a wife or a girlfriend, it's going to be much more difficult because of that attachment that he has with his mother, the responsibility that he feels. I actually just had a conversation with somebody the other night when I brought to the fact that I was doing a video of this nature, and they was telling me about her experience they had with their ex and how he was a son husband, right? So a lot of females have been through this experience of dating a man who was a son husband, and they may not have know the terminology of the concept, but they just went through it, and of course, it didn't last because it it's so much of an emotional attachment when it comes to the mother and son dynamic. When it comes to son husbands, that it's it's just unhealthy thing in order for you to really try to kind of split yourself between 2 women who's supposed to be very important in your life. Now, of course, when it comes to a man who's married or have a girlfriend, he also has a mother. Like, you can have a relationship where you have boundaries and understand the place that your mother has in your life and your wife has. Of course, you can, but there have to be healthy boundaries, healthy emotional boundaries that you definitely got to establish. All right. So let's keep reading. Ask yourself the following: did you ever feel like you are more than just a child in your family? And I know a lot of people go through that, right? A lot of people have responsibility of taking care of siblings and things of that nature. So a lot of time kids just can't be kids. And that's part of the issue when it comes to parenting, right? We're putting on too much responsibility on children when they should be living their best life, and we should be teaching them as they grow older. We should be teaching them the roles that they actually going to have as they get older. But that's kind of a different topic, but we'll keep reading. Were you the one your mother turned to for emotional support? Even when you were too young to understand adult problems, did you find yourself playing the role of confidant, problem solver, or even protector for a parent who should have been caring for you instead? Absolutely, right? So you end up being, and that's why it's called son husband, right? Because you end up playing the role of a husband when you're just supposed to be the role of the son, right? Think back to your childhood. Were you praised for being mature for your age, or were you told told you were so good for taking care of your mother's feelings? Did you feel a heavy sense of responsibility for her happiness, as if her well-being rested squarely on your small shoulders? Perhaps you sensed that something wasn't quite right, but couldn't put your finger on it. Maybe you felt a mix of pride and unease at being your mother's little man or rock. Did you ever wonder why you were privy to adult conversation and decisions that should have been off limits to a child? As you grew older, did you struggle to form healthy relationship outside your family? Did you find it difficult to set boundaries or prioritize your own needs? Have you noticed patterns in your adult life that echo the dynamics of your childhood home? These questions may stir up complex emotions and memories. They touch on a phenomenon that's more common than you might think, yet rarely discussed openly. And I totally agree. I don't think we talk about son husbands enough. I've heard it like in passing, but I haven't heard, and I watch a lot of podcasts. I'm in these YouTube streets. I'm on social media, right? I don't see this topic being broached, right? I don't get to use that word often. I love using words that I don't get to use often on here, okay? I just don't see us having a intelligent conversation about this because, and a lot of people are going through it, but we're just not talking about it, okay? So hopefully I can offer some suggestions, some advice, or I can actually present to you the information that I found to show you what to look for when it comes to a son-husband dynamic. And this, of course, is more so for my ladies out there, because I do have women subscribers. Shout out to you. So look out for when it comes to a son husband, looking out for one, right? And for the fellas, for you to take accountability and set boundaries, because I love my mom just like you love your mom, right? And it's funny because at one point in time, I used to consider myself a mother's boy, right? But then I realized I'm not really a mama's boy. I'm just a man who loves his mom and understand the sacrifices she made, and I appreciate her and I show her reverence, right? But those are two different things, right? So before I get sidetracked, let's get back to it, all right? It's a dynamic that blurs the lines between parent and child, creating a relationship that's far from the nurturing and protective bond it should be. What happens when a child becomes a surrogate partner to their parent? How does this role reversal shape their development and future relationships? And why do some mothers turn their sons into the emotional stand-ins for absent or inadequate husbands? So a lot of time it could be considered emotional manipulation, and a lot of time it's unintentional, right? Sometimes intentional, but like the fact that mothers who don't have that partner there will cling on to their son for that male attention, that male validation. And they also understand that, well, this person, my son, loves me unconditional, right? So they're willing to put in that emotional investment because they know that love will always be there. It's not going nowhere. And they also know that their mother or that son wants to make sure that their mother is good. So when it becomes too much of an emotional overload, it becomes detrimental and dysfunctional. Okay. Of course, as sons, we all have love for our mothers, but we have to have boundaries with any relationship we do. All right. What is a son husband? So now it goes into a little more of a breakdown. A son husband is a male child who has been emotionally enmeshed with his mother in a way that blurs appropriate parent-child boundaries. How does this happen? Typically causes include, but are not limited to, absent father. If the dad isn't around, the mother might rely on her son too much for support. Lonely mother. A mom who feels alone might cling to her son for company. And I will also say women who don't have a man in their life, not only will cling to the son, they will cling to any child that's there because they're trying to fill their emotional void. Overprotective mother. Some moms have trouble letting their sons grow up. I see this all the time. All the time. Family problem. If there's a lot of stress at home, like money troubles or fighting, the mother might turn to her son for comfort. Mom's own childhood. If the mom didn't have good relationship when she was young, she might not know how to set good boundaries. Cultural expectations. In some families, boys are expected to take care of their mothers, which can lead to this problem. Absolutely. You definitely see that in the Hispanic community, and you see it in other communities as well, but like Hispanic boys definitely like want to take care of their mothers, particularly if the dad is not there, right? Divorce or separation, when parents split up, a mother might lean on her sons too much, or her children, I would say in general. Physical illness or mental health issues. If the mother is battling chronic illness or struggling with depression and anxiety, she might depend on her son in unhealthy ways. So these are some of the causes of the son-husband dynamic. This is by far not an exhaustive list of the ways the son-husband dynamic is initiated, but these are some of the most common factors that contribute to this unhealthy parent-child relationship. And I would definitely say an absentee parent is like at the top of the list. Let's see. Emotional dependency. Emotional dependency is enmeshed families, particularly between mothers and sons, create dysfunctional dynamic that can have far-reaching consequences. When a mother relies on her son for emotional support and companionship, typically provided by a spouse or other adults, it blurs the boundaries of healthy parent-child relationship. This inappropriate emotional bond often stems from the mother's unmet needs or past traumas, leading her to seek fulfillment through her child. And that's one thing that is so important, like the especially childhood trauma. And I know I keep bringing up boundaries, like because a lot of people haven't been taught how to establish and set boundaries, right? Particularly men. Like a lot of time women will have their boundaries because they've been taught that, they've been socialized that. But men, we really haven't been taught that. So for a son, it will be hard for him to set a boundary with his mother because he loves her, right? So the son in turn may feel obligated to become his mother's confidant, problem solver, pseudo partner, roles he's ill equipped to handle. This dynamic can manifest in various ways, from excessive sharing of adult problems to guilt tripping the son when he attempts to establish independence. But while some may argue that close mother-son relationships are beneficial, the key distinction lies in the nature and extent of the emotional reliance. Healthy relationships foster independence and personal growth, whereas enmeshed relationships often stifle development and create codependency. The consequences of this dynamic can be severe. The son may struggle with forming healthy relationships outside the family, experience difficulty in establishing his own identity, or feel perpetually responsible for his mother's emotional well-being. Meanwhile, the mother may resist her son's attempt at autonomy, viewing them as personal rejections rather than natural steps toward adulthood. And that's the thing. The difference is between a healthy relationship between the mother and son and an unhealthy one is there's no boundaries set, and it's too much of the dependency on the emotional side of it, right? And we haven't even mentioned the financial aspect, right? When a son feel like he has to financially take care of his mother, all right, because the father is not around. The rest of this goes into the writer's personal relationship, and I think that you kind of get the gist of what the son husband is characterized as. And so it can create such a situation where you put the man will put so much onus on the person that he's with to kind of feel the same way about his mother when she's just trying to have a normal, daughter-in-law relationship, right? Well, the son husband might feel like, well, you don't love my mother the way I do, or the way I feel like you should be loving her. But one thing that people got to understand is, particularly if it's a man coming into a household with children that's not his, or a daughter-in-law, son-in-law situations, like your relationship with your parent is your relationship. You're supposed to feel the way you do. I'm not going to feel the same way. I'm not going to feel the same way about your kids that you feel about your kids. And that's one thing that we got to understand when we coming into somebody's life. Okay. So this first piece of evidence was to break down what a son husband is. I think we got a good, thorough understanding of that. So now in the next two pieces of evidence, we're going to get a little bit more specific when it comes to the son husband dynamic and why it's kind of detrimental for us. All right. So let's get into the second piece of evidence. All right. So for our second piece of evidence, why son husbands are kind of detrimental to our culture, our society, we're going to be looking at the different types of mothers that will be considered kind of mothers that kind of baby their sons and have very weird relationships with their son. Okay. So this platform is called Tiny Changes Matter. First time using it, but it definitely looks like it's kind of a relationship platform. And the title of this article is 5 Types of Mothers Who Treat Their Sons Like Husbands. All right. So Let's see what these 5 types are, and let's see if you one of these types, fellas, or I should say, ladies, those who are mothers. All right. Let's get into it. All right. When you grow up with a parent who doesn't treat you appropriately, the hardest part to realize you have not been treated properly. Mothers who treat their son like husband are also often just as unaware of the damage they do to their sons. In a situation where no one take care of them in the right way, children learn to assume many different responsibilities too early. This article for you, if you often feel incapable in spite of the fact that you are successful, you often feel like you have to control everything, otherwise something terrible will happen. You often feel like no one is ever really there for you. You are a son of a mother who treats you like a husband. You are a mother who has just realized she is treating her son like a husband. You are married to a man whose mother treats your husband like he is her husband, which, if you're in that last situation, that's tough. Okay. So, 5 reasons why some mothers treat their sons like husbands. Motherhood is never easy, and there's no such thing as a perfect mother, but some mistakes may be more damaging than others. What is essential for you to know is that no explanation of why your mother or your husband's mother behaved the way she did can justify her actions. So let's get into the first thing, which is lonely mothers, which we kind of touched at in our first piece of evidence. Suppose your parents get divorced or your father died. Sorry, I think what's going on? I think I skipped down too far. I sure did. I skipped down pretty far. All right. Pretty far. This, what you call it, is tripping. All right. Where were we? Suppose your parents get divorced, your father died, and your mother was left alone to care for you and maybe other kids. In that case, she may be eventually succumb to her feelings of loneliness. If you were the eldest child, she spontaneously started burdening you with more and more responsibility as time went on. You assumed the role of an adult. Eventually, she started sharing more and more of her personal and family matters with you. And that is not a situation you want to be in, fellas. All right. Did it really go back up? Oh my gosh. A child in such a position doesn't have a lot of choices. He can either accept the responsibility and try his best to please the mother or give up or feel utterly incompetent or worthless. The lonely mother is so preoccupied with her issues, pain, and anxiety that she cannot notice her child needs. And I really hate that for kids to be in this situation, because there is a lot of situations when an adult is dealing with their own baggage, with their own trauma, with their own financial issues. Like, sometimes they can just block everything out and just focus on what they got going on, even when they have kids. And then a lot of times that's when you see neglect going on, abuse, and things of that nature. So that's a tough situation to be in. So this speaks to why it's ever so important for us to be particular about who we choose to lay up with and who we choose to bring in our life as a partner. So important. All right. Your mother feels she needs help, but no one to ask for help, or is taught never to ask for help. So she ends up putting her children in a worse situation than she is. Okay. The second one is immature mothers. Some mothers never really grow up. I must be heavy handed. Some mothers never really grow up. They have never really planned to be mothers, so their children feel their role in their mother's life is to keep her smiling and make her feel good. What they see in their sons is the strengths they lack. They project their needs onto their sons, who then feel obliged to respond to her needs and behave maturely for their age. Such mothers will proudly say how their 8-year-old son understands them better than her husband. And if you hear a phrase like that, that's tough. Okay? Because you clearly putting that child in the position where he's gonna be uncomfortable. Okay. Particularly if you actually say that phrase in front of them, right? Children should be children. Let them be children. Since they feel, act, and think like children, such mothers never really see the damage that they do on their sons. So we're talking about immature mothers. The third one is mothers who hate men. Oh my gosh. Many women live with a deep feeling of hatred towards men. They don't know why they feel that way, but basically they never managed to establish a close relationship with a man. And a lot of time, of course, we know it's them for the father-daughter relationship, right? Or lack thereof. Such mothers will often say that they really wanted to have a girl and were not at all happy when they were told they were carrying a boy. Since they regard men as worthless, inferior, otherwise inferior, the only way they can accept them, even as their son, is to be useful to them. Such a mother, through the submission of her son, can sanctify her husband, who does not treat her as she imagined a husband should treat a wife. She is not interested in her son's personality and needs and doesn't care about him. She sees in him only an opportunity to satisfy her needs. And in this dynamic, I would say it's definitely not as that is on a smaller scale as far as that is concerned. I think the previous two is more likely to happen, or even this fourth one. So I wouldn't put as much into it. But of course, those who may be going through more of a psychotic episode or issue will fit that third description. So the fourth one is codependent mothers. Codependent people will put up with any behavior in a relationship just because there is nothing more terrifying to them than to be left alone. They will stay in a loveless marriage with a husband who obviously despises them. They will try to please their partner in every way possible way to prevent them from leaving. When a child is born in such a dysfunctional marriage, the mother will direct all of her emotional hunger to the child. She may become overprotective while the child is young, but she really protects the bond she shares with the child. Such a mother will encourage the child to behave as an adult in some ways, while also making the child feel incompetent in other ways by not allowing him to become truly independent. And that's the thing, that emotional dependency is such a big thing, because a lot of times a mother can make her son feel guilty for not being there emotionally, financially, spiritually, or what have you. And then in turn, the son will feel like, you know what, my mother is in a place all by herself. That's why a lot of times you see some sons will move them into their house, whether they married or not, right? But I always say you still have to maintain those healthy boundaries. Like, you still can check up on your mom and love your mom, and she live in her own house, right? It's possible, right? So taking on that baggage is definitely detrimental to somebody that wants to establish and hold on to a marriage, as well as someone who just wants to have that healthy boundary and relationship with their parents. So, and the last one is emotional incest. Actually, our third piece of evidence is going to go a little bit deeper into what emotional incest means, because I have to be honest with you. Before I did this research, I've never heard of the term emotional incest, and I imagine many of you probably haven't either. So, when the roles are reversed, it is called emotional incest. A lonely parent seeks comfort from the child. Emotionally, a kid becomes an adult, and an adult a child. Narcissistic parents are often prone to emotional incest. Most males who have experienced this kind of abuse from infancy think it is typical mother-son conduct. As the child's natural emotional development has been distorted to appease his mother, this is their normal, which causes not only tremendous harm, but also causes major issues in subsequent relationship with the spouse or significant other. The precarious type of child abuse starts very early in the child's life. In most cases, the mother is a single parent or has an unhappy marriage. Still, it may also be taught as a generational curse. And I know I'm having issues with this, but that's actually all I want to actually read to you with that. So those are the 5 types of mothers that treat their son like husband. Some of you may have experienced this, or some of you may know somebody that is kind of experiencing this. And that's the reason why it's so important to talk about a topic like this, because if you don't know that something like this exists, how can you be aware of it? Because if you're not aware of it, you're not going to change anything, right? So a lot of people are going through these dysfunctional relationships thinking it's normal, right? When it really is not, and it's really keeping you or harming you from moving on emotionally when it comes to other relationships. All right. So that was our second piece of evidence of why son husbands are detrimental to society and culture. We're going to get into our last piece. Once I said, we're going to get into and dive in about emotional incest and what that's really about. Let's get it. All right. So for our third piece of evidence, I mentioned from the last piece, we're going to go and dive into the idea of emotional incest. It was a new term for me, and I'm pretty sure it is for you. So we're going to break down the signs and talk about what emotional incest is, okay? Sorry. First of all, I'm tired. It's been a long day. And second of all, I had just got through cooking before I started recording. So that was like a horrible idea, and I won't do it again. Okay. Side note, right? So yeah, let's get into what emotional incest is and how to recognize it and things of that nature. All right. But this is from a platform called Healthline. Haven't heard of it. And of course, a lot of platforms that I find are more of the scientific, psychological base, which I prefer and I like because I'm a big science guy. Okay. Of course, I'm very much into history, but science is really what I love. So, science and history. So, let's get into it. All right. Oh, let me go back and read the title to you. Sorry. How to recognize and heal from emotional incest. All right. When made to emotionally fulfill the role of a spouse, children can develop a variety of psychological conditions. However, the treatment, like therapy, the cycle of abuse can be broken. Emotional incest, also called covert incest, describes an unhealthy family dynamic where a parent relies on their child for emotional and practical advice and support. Okay? Because, of course, typically the parent child dynamic when the child is young is the parent provides the emotional, financial, right, protective or physical support. All right. And then roles will reverse as the parent to get older and the child is now the adult. Those roles reverse. But when you're a young child, you're supposed to be taken care of. All right. So this is what they're calling emotional incest. Despite the name, it doesn't involve physical sexual abuse. Incest refers to inappropriate emotional closeness. Emotional incest can also happen unconsciously, unlike physical incest. Often, parents who foster this dynamic don't realize how their actions affect their child, and they also don't intend to cause harm. Yet, this behavior can still cause significant pain, not to mention disrupt healthy development. In fact, some experts say that physical and emotional incest can have similar long-term effects on child development, which that says a lot, right? That physical and emotional can have the same long-term effects. That's why this is important. So do you understand why I'm saying that son husband is detrimental or can be? All right. In a dynamic of emotional incest, your parent treats you not as their child, but more like a romantic partner. Instead of providing appropriate parental guidance and helping you get your emotional needs met, they might rely on you for comfort and company when you feel lonely or sad, help navigate financial concern, advice on navigating conflict at work or other personal relationships, loyal to them rather to the other parent or to your partner, right? Like they always want to be the number one lady in your life. All right. Which that's emotional abuse. And I guess in this term, we could consider emotional incest. All right. In the beginning, this dynamic might leave you with a heightened sense of maturity and shared closeness. If you recognize on some level that your parent tells you things adults generally don't share with children, you could feel privileged or even special. But by taking the role of a partner where you support or even parent your parent, you effectively lose the role of a child. As a result, your essential social and emotional needs may go unmet, something that can have major consequences for lifelong mental and emotional well-being. Recognize emotional incest. While plenty of expert organizations and mental health professionals recognize emotional incest as a concern, research on the topic remains limited. Pretty sure it does. Currently, there is no accepted set of criteria used to identify emotional incest. Acknowledging this lack of research, Turkish researcher created the Childhood Emotional Incest Scale to help assess childhood experience of emotional incest in adults. This scale, published in a 2021 study, consists of 12 statements divided in two sections. I'm not going to get into that. I'm going to keep going. I do want to read this part, though. Emotional incest versus enmeshment. And the first piece of evidence I mentioned enmeshment. So this is kind of breaking down the difference between the two. Enmeshment, a similar dynamic, involved patterns of extreme closeness between family members. On the surface, this closeness might seem positive and even beneficial, but it's not the same as family cohesion or healthy closeness, and it can become quite confining. Like emotional enmeshment involves few boundaries or heavily blurred boundaries within the family relationship. It often keeps family members from establishing their own identities and recognizing and meeting their own individual needs. But while enmeshment can characterize the family relationship as a whole, emotional incest tends to show up more specifically in a relationship between a parent and one child. Okay. So that's the difference between enmeshment and emotional incest. Examples of emotional incest: we got seeking assurance. Your parents get divorced 2 years ago. When you were 8 years old, your mom frequently complained about your dad's rudeness and lack of consideration when it comes to his weekends with you. He's never on time to pick you up, bring you back. At the event, she usually turns to you and asks things like, "It makes you happy when I show up on time, right?" So that to me is emotional manipulation, to be honest with you. But a lot of times you will see when in cases of a divorce or a very bad breakup, the mother or father will try to pit that child against the other parent, which is totally wrong, right? But unfortunately, that is an emotional component because your emotions are wrapped up into it. You're not thinking about the child, you're thinking about yourself. So it's very selfish. We're questioning advice, blur boundaries, right? We keep bringing up boundaries. And this just goes into why it happened, fractured family dynamic, learned parenting styles, culture and social economic factors. And yeah, that's kind of all I want to touch on. So now we understand what emotional incest is and the difference between emotional incest and enmeshment. And kind of like how it can come about that you really become so emotionally attached that it becomes unhealthy, right? And this is just not the son husband dynamic or mother son dynamic. This talks about when it comes to any relationship where like you have so much emotional attachment that it is detrimental to other relationship you have, or the boundaries are so blurred that you no longer understand the dynamics of that relationship. All right. So that was my third piece of evidence going over emotional incest. A lot of that made sense to you and tied together to each other. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and get into our closing stuff. All right, so there you have it, man. Son husbands and why they're so detrimental. Hopefully you can understand and see as we broke down what son husband are, and the enmeshment and the emotional incest. A lot of things that people haven't probably heard of, not as familiar with, but once I break it down, I hope it made sense to you how it can be an unhealthy thing when it comes to a mother and son dynamic, even with relationships in your family when you're just so close where those relationships can end up harming relationship that you have with your significant others, right? Because a lot of times we don't understand how emotionally dependent we really can be on people, right? So it's always healthy to have boundaries. Boundaries are necessary, all right? It's necessary for you and it's necessary for the other person. Okay. So we must create and maintain those boundaries. It is so important. So hopefully, you know, watching this video, you kind of reflect on your situation with your mother, your situation with your family members, your situation with people. Like, do you have a situation where it's emotional incest? And as bad as it sounds, I mean, it's an actual term, right? And it actually happens. All right. Do you have a son husband relationship? Okay. Are you allowing your son to make sure that he's able to grow into the man that he needs to be in order to take care of his family? Are you able to have a healthy boundary and let him step back and let him do his thing so that his wife feels comfortable? Because at the end of the day, as a man, it is your responsibility to create that boundary with your mother and with your wife, right? Because a lot of times that wife will not feel comfortable and she will start harboring resentment if she feel like you're not establishing boundaries, if you're not stepping up into that role of a husband, right? So you have to remember, fellas, the wife come first. I know that's your mom, but once you chose to put that ring on her finger and have a family, that wife comes first. All right. You're welcome, ladies. All right. So we're going to wrap up today's video, man. I hope you enjoyed the information. As always, man, Send me any topic you would like me to make the case on. I'll do the research and hopefully I can do you justice. I appreciate you. I can't say that enough. Of course, links will be in the description for the merch, the books, the Cash App if you would like to help support the channel. That's always appreciated as well. Social media, all that will be in the description. All right. As always, I'm you, you are me. Love always, love eternal. Remember, the worst thing you can do is lie to yourself. And I think we made that case, baby. All right. Deuces. One love.